Hello, my name is Graveen and this is Simmer. Welcome to our compost hub. We would like to start off by saying a huge thank you to everyone who came out today. We really appreciate it. Oh, before we start, can we have everyone turn in their pre-surveys if they haven't?
Do we have all of everybody's pre-surveys?
Okay, so a little bit about us. The Sutter County Resource Conservation District is a district formed under the Division 9 of the California Public Resources Code. We work closely with farmers, ranchers, and the community to get conservation on the ground in the Yuba-Sutter area. We are governed by a 5-member board of local landowners who understand the agricultural and environmental concerns facing the Yuba-Sutter area.
Our staff is also involved in the agricultural world and cares deeply for the community they live and work in. The work we do is important. We do on-the-ground projects, educational programs, provide technical workshops, coordinate work groups, and much more.
Okay, and our first speakers will be John Taylor and Mani Dami. So let's give them a warm welcome.
How do you want me to start this? Or okay. I'm a local grower here in Two-Door area, and we have some ranches just north of Yuba City. Been handling compost for 30 years. Been application. I'm an organic grower, so we've been using compost from West Side Spreading as the company I deal with mostly. And with compost, we're always trying to build up, the organic matter in the soil. And about the most you can reach in this area is about a 2% organic matter. So with that, over the years, it seems like our rates are usually at least minimum of 3 tons per acre. I like to apply 5, and depending on my irrigation scenario, if I'm on drip, I'll put it right along the tree trunk, the spreaders, the way they throw it out. If I'm on a flood irrigation system, I'll do a broadcast of it. In the fall season is when I apply a good portion of our compost, especially on the drip irrigated orchards, because I use the winter rains to take it in. And this is the compost I use is mostly green waste, so you've got about a 2% nitrogen, around 3.5% phosphorus, and about a 3% or 2.5% potassium in these. So, and when you put on a ton, so you're looking at, what's that, 40 pounds to 50 pounds per acre of in a ton of material. And green waste takes longer to break down, so that's why I can put it down in the wintertime, and the rains will carry it in. It ties up in the soil. Then when it warms up in the spring, your microbes and everything help to break it down and make it more available to the tree crop. What I found in using compost over the years is it's allowed me to stretch my irrigation cycles a little bit, because you have the organic matter helps retain the moisture, but in the same instance also helps with drainage in the wintertime if you get excess moisture. And that I have tensiometer or water probes in the fields, and I can monitor. I watch those and I can see where it helps to hold the moisture in the ground. Trying to think where am I at? If anybody has any questions, pop right in. Help me on this. I also do a lot of cover crops in my process too. So it's always about building the organic matter in the soil, where that top 6 inches is where you have your microbial life. And this helps to break down everything, so it's always kind of try feeding the tree or feeding your plants if you're a row crop farmer. It helps a lot. You can really tell the benefit in row crops even more so. They respond. I have a organic rice field that I purchased. It was been an organic system for probably 12 years, and we had this last year there was We had all of 8 inches of rain here. I planted in wheat hay in January, and that little bit of rain that we had after January, I was able to make a full crop of hay. So the organic matter, the ground worked up beautifully, and it helped retain the moisture in the soil. And we were able to take a little over 3 tons of hay per acre out of it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, with using such a low nitrogen compost, do you supplement with other nitrogen sources, or do you use like a legume cover crop to round out your nitrogen content?
Yeah, I plant a lot of vetches with, I found I enjoy, I plant it with triticale, and I also will do mustards in there too, just kind of a variety mix. The brassicas help in nematode control. Then it gives something for the vetch to climb up, because vetch can get really out of hand. The vetches I'll plant anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds per acre, depending on the field. And actually found out over time that once you get your nutrition up in the field, I found my cover crops perform a little bit. They don't perform as well. I actually have a hard time growing them, to where when I go into a new orchard or a new field and plant the covers, they really respond. In some of the newer fields I've got, a little heavier ground, my cover crops would get 4 or 5 feet tall. It just really makes you feel good, real impressive. And then with the brassicas, you get those daikon radish, and they'll grow and get big around, so they make a lot of porosity in the soil and open it up. Takes a little bit. I know the nut growers worry about it because you have to degrade everything before nut harvest. So they'll be in there mowing a little more to break that down. Trying to think of.
I have a question. Sure. How do you source your compost?
I've been working with West Side Spreading for the last 25 years. There's other people. I just have a real good relationship with her. So she makes sure when they work the compost, when they make it, there's different grades. You want it that's been turned well, and the right amount of moisture. You don't want it too wet. It's got to have a nice earthy smell too, and be very spreadable. It's I think longer when they work the compost when they're turning it, and they can work it more in the early part of the summer, and it makes for a better compost. Something that's just been turned 2 or 3 times. I know the state's pretty strict on their procedures. You have to get it up to a certain temperature and all that. And so hers, it's been a good product for me.
Can you explain the process a little bit of how the compost gets to the field and then how it ends up spread?
Well, I call her up and she says, "How many tons do you want? What are you doing?" And so they did deliver it in these belt trailers, so they can put it pretty much anywhere you want, as long as a 48-foot truck can get turned around or back in.
So kind of like the mound that's right up front.
Right up front, yeah. And what's good, if you can do it, if you can put the material early in the season. If you have places to put it, you don't need to put it on till the fall, and that works good. And then you've placed it, and it allows them to schedule better when they come to spreading. And it allows them, because trucks, if you wait until the fall season, trucks get tied up. Everybody's needs a truck, either for almond harvest, walnut, or whatever. And even with these belt trailers, Spence out there on Highway 20 is another company that's good to work with. Spence Trucking. You've probably seen the big piles of gypsum and lime and those that are out in that area. And I call up Money, and he comes and spreads for me. But there's a few other guys in the neighborhood, but as timing's all takes part of it, because you guys got to organize it with your fields and how that applies in there.
when do most people apply compost?
Depends on the grower. I would say probably most of them apply in the fall.
Is there a reason being? Is it like because it's after harvest for most commodities, or is it
That then using wintertime to put it into the soil. If you're not out there cultivating, because a lot of guys now, everybody just mows, so that helps put it into the ground. If you're on a no-till operation, flooded fields, you can apply any time, so it washes in with every flood irrigation. That makes a difference.
So you talked about you applying it in row crops. So what challenges have you seen or differences have you seen with you applying it in row crops compared to orchards?
Well, it's actually easier in row crops because they have the big spreader trucks, so they can load them up. They still will roadside it at your field because they can't haul it out into the field because it'll pack down in the spreader truck. So they'll load up the spreader truck and then they can cover 100 acres real quick that way. And to answer your question, yes, I do supplement a little bit with fish fertilizers and then there's pelletized chicken manure that I will come in, which is you can get that anywhere from being a 4% and clear up to 12%. So we'll what happens if I feel like I'm getting too much phosphorus or potassium in an orchard from doing all the composting, I'll come in with like a chicken pellet of a 1200 and spread that out.
What does the cost look like? Is it like a per ton spread, or is it?
It's a per ton. Let's see. At present, and with fuel prices and things, at present it's been around $40 a ton, and that's spread. I think if you buy just straight compost, you can spread your own. It could be anywhere between $25 and $32 a ton. And then you hire the spreader guys. They like to do at least 3 tons or more when they're spreading for their economy of their job.
Oh no, I don't have a question.
So then spreading it is like it gets delivered, and then the company. So essentially, money is on call. That whole apparatus comes out and spreads it for you, right? In that $40 range.
Yeah. That's my agreement with Westside Spreading is that.
Okay.
That's delivered and spread at one price.
Is that what pretty much all spreaders look like? They're all pretty much the same?
Yeah. Sometimes they put bigger sidewalls on them, and for the orchards you need the narrow gauge ones. When you get into out in the field crops, the row crops, they're bigger units. And there's actually some guys down south that have converted trucks that really zoom through an orchard at about 20 miles an hour, just flinging. It looks like a big dust cloud just moving.
And so that's for row crops or tree crops that you?
Oh, they've got some narrow gauge trucks that'll go through the trees too. Yeah, they've special design
to move through larger acreages.
Correct. Those guys do a lot of lime and gypsum spreading.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for John? Okay, sweet. And now we're gonna give the mic to Sarah.
Can I talk without the mic? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine as well. That's good.
Okay, thanks.
Can you hear her too?
Yeah.
I feel like I sound less weird without it.
Yeah.
So I'm Sarah Light, Agronomy Advisor with UC Cooperative Extension. I'm based in Yuba City and I serve Southern District. I kind of like that question and answer format. I don't know if you guys want to continue that. I feel like that was great to supplement a little bit of that. I was just going to talk a little bit about the importance of knowing the moisture of your compost and how you calculate that into like a nutrient budget. So if you look at the results from this compost that we have here, does anyone need one?
Sarah, can you just pour it a little bit more? Thank you. Perfect.
You can see that it's 42.6% moisture. So the nutrient analyses that you see and that our previous speaker talked about are on the second page. And those percentages on the right column are on a dry weight basis. So when you look at the wet weight, because the moisture is over 40%, you're going to really skew the amount you're applying. With such a low nutrient compost like this, you have to apply a large amount, as he mentioned, to get high nutrient content, and so you probably are going to be supplementing it with something else. But if you're using a higher nutrient compost, especially a manure-based one, not accounting for that moisture content is really going to increase tremendously the amount of nitrogen that you're putting on into your field. Or, in contrast, if you're relying entirely on that manure-based compost for your fertility needs, you might not be meeting the demands of your crop. So that's kind of like a common challenge, is using the wet weight instead of normalizing it for dry content per ton. And I would say that's why one thing that's really important with compost is getting like a really good analysis. I think this technical data sheet is really well done, because you then have a sense of how many nutrients you're applying. One risk with the organic materials like compost is that you can overload with P and K sometimes, or with other nutrients, because if you're trying to meet your nitrogen demand and the nitrogen is really low, that's why it's important to supplement either with organic sources that he mentioned, or if you're in a conventional system, you can use like urea or another high nitrogen fertilizer source. So yeah, I guess I was thinking we'd do it more Q&A. Any more questions about compost or things that you wanted to chat about?
So there's different varieties of compost.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the different types of compost?
Yeah, so the green waste compost like this are from plant materials. So that could be our agricultural plant material. It could be yard waste from cities. It could be soon it'll be more food waste coming from urban areas, and so those tend to be lower in nutrient content because they're coming from plants, as compared to something like a manure-based compost, which is higher in fertility. So that would be like composted chicken manure, composted dairy manure, and so sometimes you can get fresh manure that you can apply, and the composting process is when it's just broken down. So anything that's composted just means that the material has been broken down and isn't as fresh. And that is great because it means that it's more stable. So when you have fresh material, not only, I think we a lot of times think of the nitrogen as being lost, because that's what we talk about a lot as an environmental contaminant. So if you apply like a fresh poultry manure to your field and you don't till it in, you can have a lot gas off the top, right? But if it's composted, it's a lot more stable. So when you apply it, you have a lot less risk of losing the nitrogen that you've paid for to bring to your field and apply it. And then the other thing about it, though, is that when it's composted, the carbon is also a lot more stable. And so as microbes are breaking up carbon compounds, they're actually grabbing nitrogen from the soil around them to break it up, because they're eating that carbon for themselves as food. And so if you use a less composted material, then you're actually tying up the nitrogen in the rest of your soil a little bit more. So you know that the carbon in something like this compost is a lot more stable, and so the microbes are still benefiting from having it there because it's carbon, but they're not kind of grabbing it as fiercely and tying up the rest of the nitrogen. So there are a lot of benefits of applying a more stable compost. And on this you can actually see that they measure stability, and they're using CO2, which is based on microbial respiration, to test how stable it is. So they're actually measuring like how much are the microbes breaking down this compost actively, and they can tell from there it's very stable because the microbes aren't like respiring a lot, basically.
So what are some issues you come across if the compost wasn't as stable as you want?
Yeah, so some of them, one of the main ones would be with like a high nitrogen compost, like a chicken manure. You would expect to actually see that you would lose a lot of that nitrogen if it's too fresh, because it's going to volatilize as ammonia. And so the percent that you see on your output is actually not going to be what you're actually going to get into your soil. You were talking about applying it and getting it into the soil. So that's really important. It's like when we're applying these organic materials like compost or like cover crops, like we have to like also ultimately we want to get them into our plants, right? And so just having just applying them is not the goal, and that's the challenge. Is like, how do you go from the application to like efficiently getting it onto your farm? So one of the benefits is that the nitrogen is more stable, and then one of the other benefits is just that the carbon is more stable. So you have a better kind of anticipation of the breakdown.
So what would you recommend compost-wise putting on orchard crops compared to row crops, if you have the answer for that?
Yeah, I think in a row crop system, you can sometimes go a little fresher with your material because it's easier to incorporate it because you have an open ground, so you're not working around a tree line. So like in an orchard system, it would be really hard if you had a more fresh or less composted material to like incorporate it well into the soil. So I think in a row crop system, you have more flexibility. Also, if you can wait to plant in a row crop system, you're less at risk of burning your plants when you have that breakdown versus like in an orchard. Have you ever had any issues where you apply something too fresh to an orchard and it burns the roots or anything?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So I guess that could be an issue when you already, you can avoid the roots. So I just think in a row crop system you have more flexibility because you can, you have like a blank slate basically.
Yeah.
But the challenge in a row crop system is that you still have to get your plant date in, and so if you're trying to time your compost application around, when you're going to be able to plant, or time your incorporation. So that's why a lot of people apply in the fall, because then they have in the spring they don't have to wait for dry down and then get out there with like a disc or something like that. They can just go plant right away. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the difference between fresh and manure?
So manure is more fresh because manure is kind of just it's fresh from the dairy or from the where the chicken farm. And compost is when it's broken down. So that's like if you guys are familiar with the SWEEP program where they're incentivizing dairies to capture the gas from the breakdown. That's kind of where that idea comes from, is that as the manure breaks down, it's releasing greenhouse gases, and if we can capture them, we're creating energy, and we're also, creating compost. So, yeah, that's the main difference. Yeah.
And you can, when you have fresh manure or just manure in general, you can really smell it.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to get real close. Things are volatilizing off.
Yeah.
without getting your hands in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess the applying all these materials kind of is like a win-win, right? It helps the soil, it has the benefits you talked about of the water infiltration and water holding capacity, and building microbial activity. And then it also has the benefit, hopefully, of capturing some carbon and putting that in the soil, having less in the atmosphere. So when we do the composted material, we're kind of having that benefit as well. I guess the first benefit.
How question when you have a half a ton of compost material? What's usually the ratio?
Yeah, so they say you usually between 30 to 60, depending on the material. So, depends on the moisture content. Is a big one, but yeah, so it can be pretty big, the difference. So that's also like you're paying for that weight of moving it. Because do you pay, when you're paying for the application, does it vary, like based on if you're paying for the water weight, then you're the one ultimately paying for that shipping cost, right?
Yeah, it's basically it's done by the yard or the ton of material.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, yeah, but yeah, they say it's like 30 to 60% depending on the material. So kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a lot.
And then, Sarah, can you talk about the environmental impacts
Of compost? Yeah, so, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like a waste management tool in some ways, right? Because we're not farming chickens and having dairies so that we can create compost, right? We're doing that so we can eat chicken and cheese, and then we have compost as like a byproduct. So it's almost like a waste management tool in some ways, composting. And then, in addition, the state recently passed a Senate bill, SB 1383, that's saying by 2025, but it'll be starting this coming year, that all cities have to collect food waste and not allow it to go into the dumps for landfill. And that's because as food waste breaks up in the landfill, it releases a lot of methane, and so it's a huge contributor of methane, or a contributor of methane. So we'll soon have more of that compost available too, which I think will be kind of similar to a yard waste compost. It'll be more like a lower nutrient value. But that's where the environmental benefits come from really are like, if you look at the whole pipeline of where that material would go, what would happen to it, and then also the benefit of having a reduced soil. It's kind of just bigger than just the soil aspect, even though like the simplest way of measuring the composting to your soil, if you think about the benefit upstream and what would happen with that otherwise, a much bigger environment.
There's a company that's taking the food waste, and they've actually putting in a digester of some sort, and they've been able to pull the ammonium off.
Oh yeah.
So they have a very it's a 5% nitrogen source, but it's as clear as water. It's like UN32.
Yeah.
And so that's coming about. But I think the process is in Mexico.
Oh. Yeah.
But and you do get a higher end on the wet waste products, because you've got might have bone in there or meat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
On the food waste side.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what I'd like to visit some of those facilities, because I've heard the temperature you need to break down a bone versus like a lettuce. I was curious how they're gonna fit it all together.
I can put you in touch with a young gentleman that I've been working with. We've been talking back and forth, and I've tried some of their products.
Oh, that'd be great.
So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And then something you said.
Does anyone else have questions for Sarah?
Oh, that's why I was asking you about your supplemental N. I think because that is one of the things we sometimes don't think about when we're talking about it. If you're trying to get all your nitrogen needs from low nitrogen compost, you're going to be super over applying a lot of other things, specifically phosphorus, which also has some environmental risk. And so we just kind of want to think about the whole system as a whole, and like supplementing with a high nitrogen source is just going to really improve that efficiency, because you're not tying up the nitrogen with your carbon, you're having more productivity of your crop, and then also, ideally we're optimizing our fertility a little bit better. We're tightening it up. Usually in row crop systems that I work in, feather meal stuff is a lot better.
Well, I've had really good success in planning out a new orchard. I'll go in and put 5 tons of material down in the tree, incorporated just in the tree rows, so it's very concentrated at 3 to 4 foot area. And I've had good results with that. Also in the baby trees, we'll take and put a scoop shovel at the base of the tree, especially the micro break situation. And that, I've seen very good responses in that. And that, you don't have to go out there and put on 5 tons to the acre. It as an individual, it takes a little bit of, physical labor to do it, but that works real well.